Pistols are meant to be a reliable last resort tool. You keep them in your back pocket, and some of them have been good enough to take out of your back pocket and take into battle as your primary weapon in Call of Duty. But other pistols, well, they've been so bad you were probably better off just using them as a melee weapon. What is up, everybody? Jimmy or Chaos. Today, we are checking out what I think are the 20 worst pistols in Call of Duty history. You let me know in the comments what you think the worst COD pistol is. What top 20 do you want to see next? Drop a like. And at number 20, the PDW Ghost. Now, this machine pistol, to me, had to be one of the biggest letdowns in COD history. At the time COD Ghost came out, we had never really had a bad machine pistol or a bad burst pistol, but then along came the PDW. Tricked all of us, showed us how lame a machine pistol could actually be. The default version of the PDW was a 3-round burst, and the gold version was full auto. Now, the gold version, it was definitely better, but they were both pretty bad. The damage fall off on these things was nuts, very quickly dropping from 4 to 5 shot kills, so you were never going to get that one burst kill. And in a game like COD Ghost, where the time to kill was ultra fast, these things were a liability. You were better off just using one of the standard semi-auto pistols. At number 19, the RK7 in Black Ops 3. This full auto pistol had a decent fire rate, pretty average damage per shot, but it was held back by multiple things. The recoil, the kick, well, the visual kick, and the range drop off. Up close, you could sometimes outshoot one of the SMGs, but 9 times out of 10, you were going to get melted before the LCAR could finish off your target. And you may say, Jimmy, just use it in akimbo form. But apparently Treyarch didn't want us to do that because the accuracy is horrible in akimbo form, even if you equip the laser sight. I mean, I couldn't figure this thing out, and it was by far the worst pistol in the game on launch day. There was one other pistol added to the game via supply drops that I actually think was worse, but we'll talk about that later in the video. There was no reason to ever use this over the RK5 or the MR6. And before we move on to number 18, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to each and every one of you that comments and just interacts on the videos on the daily. I've seen some of you that have been here for, honestly, it looks like a decade. And the passion you guys show for Call of Duty, whether you're in the door, out the door right now with it, it never, ever, ever wavers on this channel. I just want to say a thank you to each and every one of you that interacts with me every single day. Now let's move on. We're not going to get sappy today. At number 18, the RK7 Garrison in Black Ops 4. Black Ops 4 had a rather long time to kill. Also had shotguns as secondary weapons. The RK7 was a 3-round burst pistol that looked almost identical to the iconic M93 Raffica from Modern Warfare 2. But Treyarch, they absolutely annihilated the damage stats. They made it almost impossible to use effectively unless you were also putting in work with your primary weapon. The RK7 was a 3-round burst just like the M93 Raffica, but the damage, it was so low. The fire rate wasn't fast enough. It just couldn't make up for it. Now, I understand that Treyarch didn't want pistols to be super powerful in the game, and I guess they consciously designed the sidearms in Black Ops 4 to be not strong enough to be primary weapons, but that doesn't erase the disappointment that we felt when we booted up Black Ops 4 for the first time and saw this 3-round burst pistol that looked just like the iconic Raffica, and then we took it into battle, and we absolutely got hosed over and over again. At number 14, actually number 17. AI would have got that right. I got it wrong. Stallion 44 in Infinite Warfare. I can't really seem to get a read on the community with this gun. On one hand, some people think it's awesome. On the other hand, some people think it's the worst 44 style revolver in the franchise. It was added as DLC a few months after release, and it has some very, very bizarre handling traits. Instead of just being a traditional 6-shot revolver like all the other 44 style revolvers in COD history, the Stallion would fire faster from the hip while firing slower when aiming down the sights. I mean, yes, this discouraged spamming, but it also meant you couldn't really get those satisfying 2-shot kills that the 44 revolver is known for in the series. So you tell me down in the comments, do you think the Stallion 44 was good or was it bad? Because I could never get the hang of the weird fire rate variable, so I'm going to put it on today's list, but as an olive branch to the other side of this debate, I put it at number 17. At number 16, the machine pistol in COD World War II. Talk about a creative name. It's funny because it was by far the most popular pistol in the game, but the community was also entirely unified on the fact that it was trash, which is really weird. It was only the most popular pistol because it was the only full auto pistol in the game with that had a bunch of semis. It was being stripped back and grounded, so people just wanted something that could hold the trigger down and spray to finish off wounded enemies. But if we look and dive into the stats, it was bad. Recoil was bad, the damage was terrible, the magazine was super, super tiny. It was literally only good at finishing off enemies who had less than half their health left. And you may say, well, Jimmy, that's the purpose of it. Well, you may be right. But other pistols were way more powerful and had better TTK values. At number 15, the 9mm PM in Black Ops 6. Once again, super creative names here. Default pistol from BO6 really seems like it should have been better than it was, but it wasn't. It was a moderate fire rate pistol, moderate recoil, along with some kind of interesting attachments, but none of them did nearly enough to make it a viable weapon in a game this fast-paced. The pistols, I mean, well, this one is only good if you're using it to quickly finish off an enemy who's already hurt. There's no way you can make it viable otherwise. At number 14, the GS45 in Black Ops 6. We continue with the awesome naming. Now, another one should have been good, but it wasn't for some reason. I don't know if I'm just using these pistols incorrectly, but the community seems to be pretty unified on them sucking, so here they are. The GS45 had a very low fire rate cap, pretty high damage, enough to get a two-shot kill at a certain range, but with how fast this game played and how slowly this gun fired, it was really easy for people to just bob and weave in between your shots and then send you back to the lobby before you could kill them. Now, I've seen some cheesy akimbo builds for this gun, but if you're just using it one at a time, it's pretty bad, pretty inconsistent. At number 13, the 1911 in COD World War II. Now, this is one of the oldest handguns ever made. The fact that it's still in production to this day is pretty amazing. Naturally, it's appeared a lot of times throughout COD history, but it hasn't always been good. In case in point, the COD World War II version. Now, it had solid damage, but it also had a very low fire rate cap for some reason, which made it really awkward to use at close range, which is where pistols are supposed to shine. Also had some weird timing on the recoil. Made it tougher than it should have been to hit follow-up shots. The damage was honestly good, but the handling and the fire rate kind of ruined the gun. At number 12, let's stick with it. The 1911 in Modern Warfare, the reboot. Let's stay on the subject. The 2019 version wasn't a whole lot better than the COD World War II version. Yes, it had access to the gunsmith this time around, so you could load it up with attachments, but at the end of the day, it's probably the worst pistol in the game due to that weirdly low fire rate cap again and the inconsistent damage output. You had to absolutely stack it with attachments in order to make it halfway decent, and even then, there wasn't much point in using it. I mean, just leave it behind for a better handgun. One more. At number 11, the M1911 in COD 4. Let's get them all out of the way right now. The COD 4 version was definitely iconic because of its role in the campaign, but the multiplayer version of the gun, it's forgettable, especially when compared to others. This one had the same fire rate, nearly identical damage stats to the other handguns like the USP-45 and the M9, but the main difference was the teeny tiny magazine and the much higher visual recoil, meaning you were sacrificing your ammo and accuracy, and you got nothing back. There was literally no reason to use the 1911 over the other standard handguns, let alone the freaking Desert Eagle. I mean, I really don't know why this iconic handgun was so bad there, or so bad frequently, but it was. At number 10, the P99 in Modern Warfare 3 2011. Now, MW3 sidearm meta was completely dominated by the FMG9 and the MP9. Shotguns were moved back to primary weapons, so you couldn't put them in your pocket like you could in Modern Warfare 2, but there were still some insane pistols here. If you weren't using one of the machine pistols, you were probably running the 44 mag or the Desert Eagle. But who here was running the P99? Probably none of you. Little handgun was the second pistol you unlocked, and put simply, it was worthless. It did have a cool reload animation, but that was all it had going for it. Damage, bad. Magazine, small. Recoil, awkward. You couldn't sustain fire. It's basically only good if you were using it in akimbo form, and nobody was just doing those. They weren't. And since we're on the topic of Modern Warfare 3, at number 9, the USP-45 in the same game. Default handgun in the game. Basically just a worse version of the P99. Damage stats were nearly identical, but the recoil was even higher. Fire rate cap even lower, and the magazine was even smaller. So it literally was a worse version of the P99. Now, I get that the developers probably didn't intend for us to use these things seriously, but they were still really bad. Like with the P99, the USP was only good if you were using it in akimbo form at point blank range. Unless that was the situation, just pull out your knife. Commando lunge all day. At number 8, the Rift D9 in Black Ops 3. Now, this DLC pistol was a 2-round energy burst. And it did have some pretty insane killing power if you could hit both of those shots. That was way easier said than done. The shots came out of the barrel very slowly. They were very slow-moving projectiles, which meant if you were trying to engage somebody beyond point-blank range, you were almost never going to get that one burst kill. I guess the Rift E9 was probably really good at destroying score streaks for some reason, but if you were trying to use it to get kills like a pistol is made to do, you were almost always going to have a rough time. Since it was locked behind the RNG supply drops, it was a letdown. With all the awesome supply drop guns that were available in Black Ops 3, it was almost frustrating to pull this one instead of one of the others. I mean, you could have pulled the Marshalls. You could have pulled the NX Shadow Claw. At number 7, the BR9 in Modern Warfare Remastered. DLC pistol. I know. DLC added to MWR some way into the life cycle, and I can appreciate it not being overpowered, but you do have to wonder, why was it added? Why was it added at all? I mean, it was a high-power handgun that actually dealt more damage per shot than the Deagle, but it also had way worse recoil, so you were never going to be able to stay on target and get a follow-up shot, even if you could manage the recoil. It was still a 2-shot kill just like the Deagle, so basically this was just the Deagle, but harder to use, and then supply drops, right? Or, I mean, I don't know. You guys tell me. I mean, I appreciate DLC weapons not being overpowered. Maybe it wasn't in supply drops. This was MWR. Didn't MWR have supply drops? I don't know. Anyway, this thing sucked. At number 6, the Executioner in Black Ops 2. There's always, well, there always will be some people who swear by this thing, and I'll always be right here to make fun of them because they're absolutely wrong. It was bad. It looked cool, sounded cool, shotgun, pistol, revolver, heck yeah, awesome idea. But the damage was horrible, the range was a joke, and the reload animation took 5.5 years to complete. And how the heck was this pistol supposed to be appealing next to other pistols in Black Ops 2? Come on. The cap, the B23R, it was trash, and you know it was trash. You could have some fun goofing around with it, but it was absolutely not a good weapon. Even if you were one of those weirdos who enjoyed it, you have to admit that it belongs right where we have it on this list. Now we arrive at the top 5. Strider 22 in Black Ops 6. Out of all the bad pistols in Black Ops 6, Strider is the one you probably hear the most about, and for good reason. I think the appeal is supposed to be the accuracy during sustained fire, but when the damage is so low and the fire rate cap is really low too, you really gotta wonder what you're supposed to do with this thing. Did Treyarch just mean for this gun to be used in hardcore, nowhere else? Because that's the vibe I get when I look how bad it is and how little they've done to make it better over the months. I mean, a lot of people consider this to be the worst gun in Black Ops 6. So yeah. At number 4, the M9 in Modern Warfare 2 2009. You probably never even used this gun. In a game like Modern Warfare 2, the inclusion of standard handguns like the M9 was really weird because there was literally no reason to take them onto battle over the monsters in the game. Shotguns, machine pistols, ARs. Seriously, why would you take a dinky little M9 into the fight when you could have the Spaz 12, the AA-12, the M93 Raffica, the G18? I could go on and on. The M9 was just a standard little handgun with pathetic damage and a lame time to kill, and it was placed right alongside some of the best secondary weapons in COD history. Why would you take it into battle? You wouldn't. Since we're on the topic, let's stay with this game. At number 3, the USP-45 in the same game. Another dinky handgun. I mean, in a game where nobody was going to use it. The M9 at least had a big magazine. The USP had a smaller magazine on top of the bad damage and a pathetic time to kill with absolutely no purpose beyond just taking up another spot on the weapon selection list. Why would you take a USP into battle instead of a full-size shotgun? Why would you take the USP into battle instead of a machine pistol? It was terrible. It was pointless. I'm willing to bet a lot of you forgot it was even in the game. At number 2, the Macarov in Black Ops. This gun is named, ironically, from a Call of Duty game with a villain. I mean, Macarov is one of the most deadly characters in the entire franchise, but the gun called the Macarov is the opposite. It's the most useless thing you could ever hold. Black Ops 1 sidearm is borderline useless, hit for almost no damage while featuring a tiny little magazine and tiny little iron sights that made it really difficult to aim. The only way you could possibly use this gun effectively was by staying super close to people and running them in akimbo form. And even then, you'd have to fire several shots before dropping them. It was a piece of crap. I mean, it was the second worst pistol in COD history. It was, I promise. And at number 1, there's not a doubt at all. Argue with me if you want, it won't do any good. It's the ASP in Black Ops. Do any of you know what the ASP stands for? Raise your hand. I always thought it stood for a stupid pistol because that's what it is, but I don't think that's right. It was pointless. Statistically speaking, it was basically the Macarov in another body, but it was somehow even worse because the magazine was smaller than the Macarov, if that's even possible. In the weapon model, it was weirdly shaped, which didn't lend itself to the weird one-handed way your character held it. So you had this pitifully weak pistol with a horrible gun model, obstructive iron sights, all in a game where you're supposed to use it against people spamming the FAMAS and the AK-7 4U. Even back in the day, we were calling the ASP the worst pistol in the entire franchise, and now we're almost 15 years later, and it's still the worst one. If you never used it, just consider yourself lucky. This is as bad as it gets. Let me know one pistol that was bad that we didn't give enough negative attention to, and I'll see you soon.